What's going on, everybody? Bobby Fi here, flying solo today. Just want to wish the best to Sheets and his family, going through a really hard time. So people are asking about projections and things like that. Sheets has gotten out whatever he can get out. And just a reminder, I do hope that everybody has the Saber Sim package as well. But even if you don't, you do have Goldie's projections for DraftKings, which you can sort of figure out the difference between FanDuel and that. And that's the aggregate from all the industry. So let's get it, fellas. Please hit the like button before Rody has to remind us, and let's get after it. So here's what I'm doing. Basically, I'm going to do a quick, I did post for all of you guys, in the premium. I posted my early builds for NBA and MLB. And I think that there's a lot of ways to go tonight. A lot of people are very sort of centered in on certain stacks. And I just think, Milwaukee mainly. I have one 4-man Milwaukee on FanDuel. Everything else for Milwaukee, I think I might have one 4-man on DraftKings. But everything else for Milwaukee, I just don't think you need a 5-man stack when there's this many games on this slate. There's plenty of good spots, and I think we should be attacking all of those spots. So with that said, I'm going to do a real quick run through of sort of my ownership percentages and not give all my lineups away, because I do feel like the people for premium deserve to keep that premium. But what I'm basically doing is I've currently got an uncomfortable amount of a lot of different pitchers that maybe I'm a little higher on than some others. I have 21% Joe Ryan to the field's 4 or 5%, maybe at the most. I really like Joe Ryan as a pitcher. I understand that Tim Anderson's back. I understand the wind's blowing out in Chicago, not the Cubs, but the White Sox. It actually has a pretty big impact on that stadium as well. I'm okay with it, and I'm going to bet on the Joe Ryan strikeout upside over the other. 21% Joe Ryan on DraftKings, 31% Cole. I might end up with 40% Cole. I'm a little higher on Cole than it feels like everybody else is, but then you look at it and a bunch of people are doing it. Bryce Miller is the interesting one. Let's talk about that, because I don't mind the idea of using the 4K pitcher, but I also want to point out that there's a lot of other cheap pitchers that you should be mixing in with some upside. I would go, Bryce Miller is my favorite of those super cheap guys, but then you get Wisniewski as a long shot at 5,300, Mason Miller at 5,700, Steven Matz at 5,900, Bibby at against the now can never hit Yankees at 6,500, even Waka at 7,500. So there's a lot of good options in spend downs. I just want to add that. So I don't think you have to play Bryce Miller. Having said that, I am going to play some Bryce Miller tonight. I don't know exactly where the percentage will be at the end. It's probably going to be around 25%, probably near the field. That might be a little higher than it should be. So I'm sort of debating whether to spread him out or whether to get him just in one big buy-in lineup and sort of forget about it, because it is a little bit tricky to handle these situations with high variance on young pitchers who are coming up from AA. And usually I would say, hey, take both sides of it. I just didn't quite get to both the A's and Seattle tonight, but I have no problem if you want to go on that route. I also have 25% of Steven Matz. Look, I'm just betting on the long term of him being able to be okay. I don't even like that I'm doing it. So I definitely am reconsidering these Matz and Miller builds. Just was one of my initial builds. And I'm probably going to end up with closer to 15% on Matz. Probably get a little more Waka in there instead. I have 15% Zach Gallen. I'll be below the field on him, I guess, on DraftKings. 20% Hunter Brown. There's a lot of good, spend up pitching options today. I like Hunter Brown. I do think the matchup's a little tougher than people are giving it credit for with Gallen, and giving the fact that the ownership will be lower on the Joe Ryans and the Browns, I think that I'm willing to go that direction. I also want to point out, it is kind of a scary fate. Zach Gallen has been, without a doubt, over the last month, the best, fantasy pitcher we've had in baseball. I do feel like this matchup is not quite as ideal for him as some of the other ones that he's faced. Also, historically, a guy who always pitches much better at home. So those are some things that I'm weighing in. And this season, you can see that he's, really been better at home. He's averaging 15 fantasy points in away games and 39 in home games. Only a 6-game sample size, but still. It's just reasons to try and fade guys who have some ownership. In terms of stacks, I have a ton of – I actually have a lot of the Dodgers. I'm looking at my Dodger ownerships. Everybody's about 25%. I like the Twins a lot. It's weird because I was high on Kopech as a while back, but he's just struggling too much. And I like the Twins. I wanted to take advantage a little bit of that windy game in Chicago. You have some cheap options with the Twins, so I definitely like them. So Minnesota, LA on DraftKings, pieces of Milwaukee, and I really like getting some exposure to that Cubs-Washington game as well. Even with like some tiny light rain, it kind of worries me just because it is such a weird stadium for, they just tend to postpone games all the time a little late. But I really do like the Chicago-Washington game as a, both sides of it, particularly the Chicago side of it, after Trevor Williams as a full game stack potentially. And maybe even just do, you don't necessarily need to stack it, but I like both sides of it enough to where I have a pretty good amount of ownership on that. So Toronto, LA, the Cubs Washington game, and pieces of Milwaukee to go with it, as well as Minnesota. I have more Baltimore on FanDuel for whatever reason. I wanted to get to more of them. I just didn't quite find enough builds. I guess that's the best way to put it, because I do like them. There's just a lot of good stacks I like. Houston's another one that I'm very sad to be under-owned on. I do have some Alvarez and Tucker one-offs. But that's sort of like an overall of what I'm doing by position. Catchers, Contreras, Ruiz, Will Smith, Christian Vasquez are my main catchers. First baseman, Tellez, Freddie Freeman, Joey Meneses, and Vlad Guerrero. Second base, Turang, Horner, and Luis Garcia as my favorites. A little bit of Vargas for the Dodgers and Dodger stacks. Third base, Miranda, Muncy. Love Edwin Rios today. Here's my take a shot to get a home run today. I think Edwin Rios goes yard today. That's my prediction. I love him at 2,200. It's a little messed up because it's a lot of eye tests for me. Like I watched this guy take batting practice so many times for the Dodgers. I watched him play in game. I mean, there was a year where his home run per at bat was, I believe, better than anybody in baseball. Just an immense amount of power. I like getting to him some. But Muncy, Miranda, Rios, Chapman. Shortstops, Correa, Betts, Swanson, Bichette. Outfield, I've got a lot of Winker, Larnack. I do have some Michael Taylor in my Minnesota stacks. Buxton, Yordan Alvarez, Trace Thompson, Cody Bellinger, Springer, Varsho, Verdugo. And I like getting to a little mini Red Sox stack more than I do the full Red Sox stack, for what it's worth. I'm using 4 pitchers on FanDuel. Those pitchers are Urias, Cole, Hunter Brown, and Waka. And that's sort of a rundown of what I'm doing as far as MLB goes. Pop in your questions about MLB or your thoughts on what you're doing. I'd love to hear it and go back and forth. In the meantime, I'm going to go to you know what? I hope we can talk a little more baseball, because Jimmy Butler being announced out, and which doesn't entirely surprise me, obviously does change the slate. It actually makes a lot of sense that Jimmy Butler would sit here because they have that 1-0 cushion. It's sort of like, even if Embiid, if they lost game 1 and got smoked for Philly, I think you do see Embiid. I think you likely see Embiid in game 2. The fact that they stole game 1, I just don't think you're going to see Embiid in game 2. I think you're doing the same thing with Butler. So we'll get into that in a minute. Thanks on Yankee Guardian pitching duel. That's a really rich. I love it. I like both of them. So I actually have of Bibby. I've got 15% of Bibby, and I've got Cole as my highest owned pitcher right now. So that's how I think of it, basically. I guess that's a pretty quick way to sum it up. And it's an interesting matchup because, like, I've heard a lot of people trying to, like, maybe overanalyze Cole here and Cleveland doesn't strike out enough and all these things. And I get it, but who was the highest scoring pitcher last night? Was it not Domingo Germán, who would have even been higher scoring if they could have held a 2-0 lead without him? Germán was amazing last night against this same Cleveland team. So you're telling me Garrett Cole can't be amazing against the Cleveland team that hasn't hit in weeks? I don't know. Maybe I'm biased because Cleveland knocked us out of Survivor like twice in 2 different things. Like, give me like 2 different things. It's just, or no, they actually only got us once, but they kept everybody else alive by losing. Anyway, just very frustrated with the Cleveland team. But I do like Cole for what it's worth as my top pitcher. But I don't think it's a big gap. And I think getting spreading out your pitching makes a little more sense today than some other slates, because there's a lot of guys who I could see being the highest scoring pitcher of the night, even down to, like, if you want to get weird with it, well, it's really unlikely. Michael Wacha probably has like 30 plus upside in this matchup. And he also wouldn't surprise me if he got roughed up. If it was a small slate like last night, I would be saying, hey, let's take the other side and stack against the chalky Wacha. I don't think I'm going to do that tonight. So I like the Dodger lineup for what it's worth that they released. I got to go adjust my lineups when that's done. Yeah, see, I love this question from Forrest. I did look at Tyler Wells. Like, I really actually, I'm a believer, okay, to some extent. It's hard for me to argue him over Wacha given the matchups, but maybe that's wrong. You know what I mean? Maybe that could even be a mistake that I'm making, because you get Tyler Wells at no owner. Like Wacha, if he's coming off a bad, like if he struggled in that one start and then he's been really good at different times, but you're not going to get much ownership on Wells, and I think he's completely viable. Maybe he's a little worse than Wacha is in this given the matchups, but he can't be that much worse. Although Wacha's not getting enough ownership either. Maybe that's what I do to answer Forrest's question. Maybe I play a Wacha and Wells lineup. My issue with Wells and Wacha, for that matter, although I do believe Wacha has the upside against this occasionally just absolutely. I mean, they're not a good hitting team, the Reds. They've got some interesting pieces, like every team in baseball. But it seems like I don't know, for whatever reason, I have a little harder time with picking on KC than the Reds. And again, that could be my mistake. I do like Tyler Wells, and maybe the simple solution is just, hey, you know what? Just so I get some exposure, maybe get a Tyler Wells, Michael Wacha build together, because I do think that he's more viable than maybe the field's treating him. I'm just surprised to see that, like, I mean, you're looking at the ownership, that Goldie's projected ownership right now, which, again, the aggregate across the industry, you've got nobody above 30%, with Zach Gallen as the highest owned pitcher against a team that we've been stacking most of the beginning of the season. I will be lower than Gallen. I will be lower than on Urias, and I will be higher on Cole. I will be higher on Hunter Brown. I will be higher on Joe Ryan. I will be, and the problem with playing the other guys is, like, one of these studs is getting 30 tonight almost all the time here. Now, can one of the 7,500s get there? It's more of a reach for Wells than Wacha for me, just because of the matchup. Even again, still a good matchup, not quite as good as Wacha's, not quite as good of pitching conditions in San Diego look pretty good, but. And as far as Bryce Miller, I actually like Bryce Miller. Mason Miller is the one I'm having a little bit of a harder time getting to at 20% ownership. I do have some of them, but I just think there's a lot of different options. It's hard for me to criticize too hard if you want to play any of these guys. It's kind of interesting to see Mason Miller get twice the ownership at basically the same price as Steven Matz. I know Matz has been bad. I still believe that he's a good enough pitcher to get through a weak Angels lineup, especially. I mean, you've got what's his name leading off tonight. You've got Zach, the Neto, whatever, leading off. It's just not a very, without Ohtani in there. I know it's lefty. It would have been lefty, but I don't know. There's just a lot of pitching options you could go through that I'm not going to really take too much time to argue about. Goldie's boy is which Miller though? Rody, which Miller is Goldie's boy? Because both Millers are going to be extremely high owned. And it's interesting on a slate where we have Garrett Cole, Zach Gallen, who's turned into the best pitcher of all time. Urias at 9,100 is a fair price. Hunter Brown, who I like a ton. And then you've got the unowned Joe Ryan. All of those guys can put up 30 plus. To be honest, those guys can put up 40. So will the 15 from the Millers do? And Mason Miller. So the problem with Mason Miller is I actually think I think Seattle's match. Like I would. Okay. Mason Miller, my issue is that I think that it's a little bit of a tougher matchup. I do think Seattle's offense is going to start clicking at some point. I actually think, I'd rather pick on the A's if I had to pick on one of the two. And but good pitching conditions, certainly no issue. But Mason Miller is the one I will be lower on personally. That extra 1,700 actually does make a difference too. But I think that we might be. I'm into the future of Mason Miller. I'm into the future of Bryce Miller. But we've got Mason Miller, and he hasn't gone more than 4 innings in a start yet. This matchup is the toughest one he's faced, debatably. I guess you could call it the Cubs because they've been awesome. But I know that Seattle hasn't been great to start the season. There's still some good hitters in that lineup. So personally, I'm siding a little bit more with Bryce Miller. That's where I'm at. And guys, if you want to fire on an NBA questions, go ahead. I'm going to try and update the projections. But again, we can always go back and forth to basketball, to basketball and NBA. And I like Forrest's point here that the entire 7K range is being ignored. It's true, and the reason is because these under 6K guys are sort of popping a little bit. And it's because you have great stuff at the top. So people aren't going to do the mid-range thing. In general, I would say that is a good idea. A good time to attack these teams is when that happens. So, sorry, I got a message from my kid. So let's jump over, because my whole basketball lineups are going to change. A lot of my really cool plays that I liked early on maybe aren't going to seem quite as cool as they were. Maybe they will. We'll see. You got to like the Knicks tonight without Butler. It'd be pretty amazing if Miami could pull off a win here. I think that people will flock over to Bam, Kevin Love, Lowry. To be honest, they're all totally in play. I'm going to suggest that maybe Max Strus gets a little bit overlooked. I'm not sure about that yet. Maybe not. It's a little tricky for me. And it's hard for me to see how they really contend in this game without Butler. Already missing Hero, obviously. But I guess if I had to rank them, I think I would go Lowry. Lowry, one of either Caleb Martin or Gabe Vincent, Kevin Love, Bam, Struss, Ben Robinson. Boy, it could get ugly, though, a little bit tonight. I mean, don't forget, though, teams do step up, but maybe we can, that's a tricky one for me to figure out. On the Knicks side tonight, I am probably going to just suck up and play Julius Randle, assuming that he's starting. I think he will play. If he doesn't play, obviously, we have a different conversation coming up, but we'll know that before lock. And I will be happy to talk about it in Discord. But I do like Julius Randle. I don't find any of the other Knicks to be a priority for me. The next one I'd want to play would be Brunson, but I'm probably not going to get to him because I like the last game a little bit better. And I'm okay with I would like a tournament flyer on quickly, because I think he's much better than this. I also think there's some blowout run that he could end up getting and sort of leading the charge on. But I'm just not getting as many Knicks after Randle. The Lakers, I really like Anthony Davis tonight. I think this is, a matchup. He's actually played well against this team going back to even the playoffs. He had a good playoff series against them when he was in New Orleans. It's obviously Kevon Looney is like way underrated, but Anthony Davis is not Sabonis. One, he doesn't play every game, so that's one thing. No, but it depends on what Davis version we get tonight. The Lakers are competitive and they're in there, and then it's a tight game. It's going to be because Anthony Davis has 60+ fantasy points, in my opinion. Anthony Davis is my favorite Laker. Actually, my favorite Laker may be Dennis Schroeder, and I think his ownership will be lower now. My thoughts on this series are, I like Golden State to win the series, and I'm a Laker fan. Obviously, I'm rooting for the Lakers, but I like Schroeder and Vanderbilt tonight, because I think when you're talking about guarding Steph, they're literally the only two guys outside of, you could argue for Austin Reeves. I just don't think the lateral quickness is there, and I don't think that there's certainly no way D'Angelo Russell can guard him. I actually use a chance D'Angelo Russell doesn't even close some of these games that are close. I think you might see Schroeder out there, because he's it's not that he's like an elite defender, but he's a hound. If you give him one job, he'll go out there and do it. So I'm into the idea of Vanderbilt and Schroeder will take Steph a lot of the game, and I'm going to be overweight on both those two guys in a significant way. Anthony Davis being my other favorite, followed by Austin Reeves. But I like all four of those guys. I'm going to be well under on D'Angelo Russell. If he beats me, great. Then the Lakers probably win. I don't like Russell on the defensive end in this series. I think he struggles, and I think that the Lakers end up having some games where Russell scores 40 and some games where Russell scores like 15 or 20 fantasy points, not 40 real points. Then on the Golden State side, this could be the one the Lakers. This would be the one the Lakers should try to get, because you've got Golden State playing on. It's going to be every other day now for them anyway. But you saw how exhausted they looked after that 7-game series. By the end of it, Wiggins and Clay, especially Clay, looked really spent. But they did have, they did get the extra half day because it was a noon game. So even those little things make somewhat of a difference. But maybe some of the fire is out of them a little bit, and maybe this is the one the Lakers can try and swoop in. Obviously, I like Steph. I do think that if you're playing Golden State, you have to play. I mean, if you're playing this game as a stack, I really think you have to try to prioritize at least one of Steph, Clay, Draymond. And then maybe you could say Wiggins if you're not playing the other three. But even that, I probably would want two of those guys. In general, if it was a giant slate, I would be saying try to, keep your Steph lineups without Draymond, but you can play it more with Clay or more with Wiggins. And I also think there's an outside chance that Jordan Poole goes off at points in this series because they're going to pay attention to Steph whenever those other guys are on the court. So whether it's Vanderbilt, that other guy's not going to be on Poole very often. I just feel like this could be a series for Poole. So look out for a weird Jordan Poole game. Maybe tonight's not the night, but I do think you want to get exposure to all those guys. My favorite is Curry, followed by Green, followed by Clay, followed by Poole, followed by Wiggins, followed by Looney. I do think it's going to be a little harder for Looney to put up the same types of numbers that he did in the last series in this one. I think some of it will shift over to Draymond, some of those rebounding numbers you'll see, just because I don't think they're going to let Looney go out there and get like 11 offensive rebounds in a game. So I wanted to throw that. The way to approach Miami with no Butler is a really tough question. Like I said, if Lowry, but the problem is if this game does get blown out, he's probably off the court early, but he's going to try to do his best, and Lowry can still do it. So I'm going to say that Lowry is now my priority from the Miami side of things, regardless of who's starting or whatnot. I do think Caleb Martin or Gabe Vincent, you want to try to get one of those two, and then you want one of Kevin Love, Bam, or Struss. I don't want to say a minimum, but likely you want three guys for Miami at least, and that's the way I would divide it up. Anyway, guys, I'll be in Discord all night. I'm going to try to get a weather update. I'm going to try to get a weather update and go from there because I need to figure out, and then I've got to get my Dodger builds, change some players in that are out, and see if I want to change anything else. But I appreciate all you guys very much. Please hit the like and make sure you're subscribed. If you're not in our Discord, you're making a big mistake, and I will post the Discord in here. Love the action in our Discord, especially the premium is just like awesome these days. A little bit quiet last night, kind of a weird slate, but I think we'll be firing tonight. So I'm excited to see how we do. Anyway, I appreciate you all. I'm going to end the stream and say good luck to everyone tonight. Any questions, I will be in premium chat all night.